Hey guys, Chris here with the Good Old Gamer. So today we're going to revamp our IPC testing methodology due to popular demands out there. And I'm going to go over that with you guys here in this video, as well as show you some re-benchmarks with the new methodology in place. Now, we did lose the MSI P7 and SLI motherboard. God rest its soul. It perished during this grueling benchmark test of ours, and luckily some of you guys out there are going ahead and helping me out getting new LGA 775 boards in for more testing, so I was only able to complete this new round of benchmarks on one CPU. So let's go ahead and check it out. So first up, we are going to keep the Cinebench R15 IPC benchmark. The reason for this is this benchmark is used everywhere. You can go to any website out there and compare results that I'm showing here to any other CPUs out there because everybody uses this. It's also been made very clear when trying to find other programs to use for IPC testing, there really aren't too many good options out there. It took me a very long time to find the ones that I did. And, well, that's the reason why I went with them, is because they do work well under these conditions. So next up, one of the new ones, we're just going to be using CPU-Z. Now, the built-in benchmark here has come under some fire, but from what I've seen, the numbers do kind of jive and are in line with other performance numbers that I've seen using different programs such as Cinebench. So as far as I can tell, this program seems to be very good. It's very consistent, and that's what I'm looking for, something that's not going to vary wildly from test to test, something that will deliver the same results time in, time out. Now, of course, what we're doing is we're going to test it 5 times. We're going to ignore the top score, the bottom score, and average out the middle 3. There are small deviations and variations here, but it's nothing super crazy. After that, we're going to go ahead and use Blender as well. Since we're using Cinebench, might as well use Blender, as it does deliver slightly different results compared to Cinebench. It is a very similar process, but in this one, it doesn't give you a score. What we're doing is we're measuring time. The longer it takes to render the scene, the worse off the CPU is. Of course, we're just using a single core and a single thread to go ahead and test this. Now, I'm using the Ring test, which you can go ahead and download. It's absolutely free from Blender. You can go ahead and just check it out for yourself if you guys wanted to run the same test. And I'm using this one because it's less demanding than like Gooseberry or something like that, which on the older CPUs would literally take hours. And realistically, I just don't feel like testing one test for hours on end. So I went with the Ring. It's a little bit shorter. Doesn't really matter what test it is that we do. It's just as long as it's the same across the board. The only change there is I changed it from the 32 by 32 grid to a 64 by 64 grid for testing. And now, finally, this was the last test that I found, and honestly, this is one of the best tests that I could think of using, and that's IDA 64. First off, we can go ahead and use that to figure out cache latencies, and that's super helpful in determining basically where some of this IPC gain is coming from. So this is actually beneficial to us to test to see if the cache timings are having a direct impact on performance, which, shocker, they will. But we can see exactly how that kind of correlates, as well as the fact that it has benchmarks inside of it specifically tailored for different parts of the CPU. So for example, we're going to only use 2 of them. We're going to use the IDA 64 Queen benchmark test, which is an integer-based test. And once again, it delivers very consistent results, and it doesn't take hours to do, which is great, so that's super helpful. But it does deliver very consistent results from test to test. So same thing, run it 5 times, ignore the top and the bottom, average the 3 in the middle, and then we're using the IDA 64 FP32 ray tracing test, which is obviously a floating point 32 test. So we're testing integer-based and floating point-based benchmarks through IDA 64. And then, of course, same thing, run it 5 times, ignore the top, ignore the bottom, and then average the 3 middle tests. So alrighty, guys, now that we understand what it is that we're doing, let's go ahead and actually check out some benchmarks ourselves. Now, of course, because I couldn't benchmark all of the Pentium series again because the motherboard died, I'm going to be pairing the Pentium D 930 against a stock Ryzen 5 1600X. So we can use the 1600X as kind of a baseline of a more modern day CPU to compare it against these older CPUs. So let's check it out. So starting off with Cinebench R15, we can see the Pentium D930 still hitting 39 points. Well, the Ryzen 1600X hits 152 in single thread performance. Now, obviously, that's pretty huge. How huge? Well, we're talking about 390% increase, or a 3.9 times increase. So that is rather large, but that's not unexpected. Moving over to the CPU-Z single thread performance, we see the Pentium D930 coming in at 99.9 points in this benchmark, whereas the 1600X hits 423.2 points in this particular benchmark. And this should be pretty simple math for anybody out there. If the Pentium D is 100%, that puts the 1600X at 424% of the Pentium D. So basically 4.24 times. Now the Blender demo, this is a little bit different. This is the only test where lower is better because we're measuring in seconds to render this scene. So it took the Pentium D 2,364 seconds, and it took the 1600X only 271 seconds. Percentage-wise, we had to flip these around. If the Ryzen 1600X is 100%, that puts the Pentium D 930 at 872%, or 8.72 times longer to get through this benchmark than the 1600X. Now, moving on to Ida64, I was really interested to see how these benchmarks stacked up, as I've seen some pretty interesting results out of these. But comparing the Pentium D 930 at 2193 points in this integer-based benchmark, we have the Ryzen 1600X at 7856. Now, I'm a little bit unfamiliar with ray tracing as a technology, but the Pentium D is coming in at 143 K-rays per second, and then we have the Ryzen 1600X coming in at 900 K-rays per second. I'm thinking that's kilo rays, so 1,000 rays per second, so that would be 143,000. That would be my assumption. If you guys could please let me know in the comment section below, that would be awesome. Now for the Ida64 percentages, I decided to combine those together, so assuming the Pentium D represented 100%, that puts the 1600X at 358% in the integer performance test and 629% ahead in the FP32. So that's a pretty large jump right there. Now, we also went ahead and tested cache latencies. Now, of course, the Pentium D does not have an L3 cache, so that is obviously not tested here, but we can compare L1, L2 caches comparatively. So we have the Ryzen 1600 at 1.1 nanoseconds. This is all measured in nanoseconds. It says there on the bottom, just in case if you're curious, against 1.4 nanoseconds on the Pentium D. Now that's only 0.3 nanoseconds, but when you're only dealing with 1.4 total, that's a large portion right there. So that is pretty sizable. Now the big one is on the L2 cache. The Ryzen 1600 is coming in at 4.5 nanoseconds in comparison to 10.6 nanoseconds on the Pentium D930. So that is a rather huge disparity there, when the 1600X's L3 cache at 12 nanoseconds is almost as fast as the Pentium D930's L2 cache. Well, alrighty guys, I hope you found that kind of interesting. Like I said, it's really academic because we're comparing this against a more modern CPU. It's a little bit more out of context. I would have liked to shown it in comparison to its other brothers, but we do know that at least in Cinebench, the Pentium D930 of the NetBurst architecture was the fastest of the bunch. So even if we have to use those benchmarks in the next test against AMD, we are using the best possible numbers against the AMD CPUs. And that's probably the way it's going to have to go. And throughout time, I will probably integrate the other benchmarks in there that will likely be slightly lower, just a few percentage points, as we saw with the Cinebench benchmark last week. So next weekend is when we will do the AMD Athlon 64 IPC test. We will compare that directly with the NetBurst Pentium 4s and Pentium D numbers. Of course, I'll keep the Cinebench numbers from the Pentium 4 and the Pentium D830 that we did last week, but the other benchmarks will likely only have to compete against the 920. But once again, that's the best one and the most advanced one. So likely that's giving Intel the most advantage in those scenarios. But yeah, so I'm really super excited to go ahead and get that out to you guys. Numbers for the most part are pretty much done, but I want to go ahead and release it on the weekend. This way, most of you guys can get to it and have access to it and watch it, because I know a lot of people are really, really excited about this. And honestly, I've been making a ton of videos here lately, and I kind of need a little bit of a break. I need to slow things down a little bit. I need to actually play some games, because I need to make videos on some games, so I need some footage, and there's a lot of other stuff I need to do. This IPC testing, I'm super into it, and I think I've just been kind of pushing myself a little too hard. Push that motherboard a little too hard, too. I don't know. I was underclocking. I had a 3.2 gigahertz Pentium Extreme Edition 3.2 in there, and I was underclocking it to 2.8 at the time, actually, and then it fried. So I don't know. It was actually 400 megahertz slower than it was supposed to be, and then it just decided, no, I've had enough of life, so I don't know. But thank you guys for your support. There was a lot of people reaching out. Ozzy from Oz Talks Hardware, thanks, buddy. He wanted to go ahead and help out. It looks like a couple of you guys out there wanted to go ahead, reach out, send some parts this way. If you have anything just laying around that you don't need, please send them my way. I can go ahead and use them. I'm going to do the mismatched world record 3D Mark benchmarks here in the near future. So just using random parts would be great. No AGP cards. I'm not going to use anything AGP. No AGP boards. Obviously, that's not going to work. So pretty much PCIe or newer, or PCI. A lot of old PCI cards, those would work just fine as well. Well, alrighty guys, if you like this kind of video, please hit that like button, please subscribe, please share with friends. That really helps me out. And if you guys want to see more videos like this, please consider becoming a patron. We're still shooting for that 100 patron mark. Just $1 a month. That's all it would take. You can go ahead and help me out that way. We can try to help hit our goals, and that gets more tech on hands. And then everybody wins because you get more videos like this, and that's awesome. Well, alrighty guys, that's all I have for today, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.